Joan Baez, live.
Deep in my heart, I do believe we shall.
You certainly know the voice, and you'll recognize Joan Baez. In our retrospective of the 60s, we're going to talk with her this morning. These 20 years after the times that would change our lives. It's Tuesday, July 26th.
Fresh out of Heroes in the 80s, has said Joan Baez, who was unquestionably one of the great heroines for a lot of young people in the 60s and 70s. The purity of her voice, so many wrote about. The achingly sweet soprano.
Keeps falling like helpless tears.
Today, Joan Baez is 42. She is still singing, and she has never wavered in her commitment to peace through nonviolence, and she joins us this morning here. It's really nice to see you. Very nice to have you.
Lovely to see you in the flesh.
You watch? You get up early?
Yes, I do.
Ah, good. Looking back at the 60s, looking back at the turbulence, can you say that in the end it was good for you?
Well, I wouldn't really talk about me as much as I would talk about the people who did what they did in the 60s. And I would say for the most part, first thing that comes to my mind is that we really have to do something like it, only more so and more intelligent and more serious for the 80s, or we might not have a 90s. The other, but in reference to people from the 60s, I think perhaps the people who really did what we did in the 60s never took enough credit for having ended the war that we finally did end. Yeah.
1979, you issued an open letter to the government of Vietnam criticizing them for human rights abuses and for holding prisoners in camps. A lot of people turned on you then. Jane Fonda, for one. Have you talked to her since?
Jane Fonda didn't turn on me. Jane Fonda has probably felt similarly to a lot of people who are left-oriented, who really had put a lot of stock in the Hanoi government, which is something I've never done with any government. I really think that when the government doesn't really act for its people, on behalf of its people, then it must be criticized. It doesn't matter if it's right wing, left wing, center. You really have to.
But do you think you can also fault a lot of the people who were part of the anti-Vietnam movement in the 60s for not, in the 80s and in the 70s, holding the government of Vietnam to account?
I think that what was done in the 60s really had to be done against the people who were doing the monumental amount of damage, and that was ourselves, and we can't kid ourselves about that, the dropping napalm my feeling is, and I was there, I think you probably know that, in 1972, I was in Hanoi, and it happened to be one of the strongest bombings in the history of the world. And you sit under that, and you see rather clearly what's going on. On the other hand, my addiction to nonviolence really does negate violence from the right or from the left. And when I was in Hanoi, my Vietnamese host, learned not to toast fallen B-52s because I wasn't interested in that kind of behavior. I mean, I'm interested in human lives and keeping them alive.
You said once there's something worth dying for, but there's nothing worth killing for.
I think that unless we learn how to fight in that fashion, and we do have Gandhi and we do have Martin Luther King and we have people like Lech Walesa to learn from. They're fighters, they're engaged in a real war, but they have really assumed that it's not their right to take other people's lives.
We talked a little bit about the politics of the 60s yesterday. Let me ask you about the sexuality of the 60s. It was also a sexual revolution. Have you decided in the end where that has brought all of us, maybe women in particular, but all of us?
You popped that one out of the blue, probably to give you a really, intelligent answer. I'd have to think about it a little bit. I think for everybody, there is certainly some kind of liberty that didn't exist before the 60s. What people have done with that is different, probably in different places all over the world. And whether or not in the end, for instance, the first thing that comes to my mind is I have a son. I have a feeling that his reaction will be somewhat, like another wave against that, as though maybe when he grows up he'll choose to have a family and be stable and settle down, just all the stuff that we were all busy fighting in the 60s. I don't know.
You said once that you're really getting to the top of the hill to look at the promised land.
That was
You're
Martin
still
Luther
climbing.
King, but I...
Well, you were
nice
quoting him
quote.
and talking about yourself. You said you were still climbing en route to the promised land. What does it look like?
I'm still waiting for a peak.
Let me ask you so that we can hear something. I know you're going to come back at the end of the broadcast and do a little more. Would you sing us to the break?
Okay, what I'd love to do is sing without the guitar at this moment, then I'll use it later. Take me to heart, and I'll always love you, and nobody can make me do wrong. But take me for granted, leaving love unshorn. It makes willpower weak and temptation strong. A woman's only human, this you should understand. She's not just a plaything, she's flesh and blood, just like a man. So if you ought to do right all day, woman, you gotta be a do-right night man.
Oh, my. Joan Baez. Nothing more to say. We'll be back.
Kurt Vonnegut once wrote that where there is a cause, there's a Baez. We leave you this morning with the singing of Joan Baez.
So the word is goodbye. Makes no difference how the tears are cried. It's over. And my heart lives alone. I can make believe you need me when it's over. I'm just an empty shell with nothing for tomorrow. I'm here to face the sorrow. The dreams we sailed were far and wide. Gonna get a little love inside, not to take it all and watch me fall. I got me loving you, I had you loving me.